On the weekend of the 5-year anniversary since buying into South Shields Football Club, it's my pleasure to welcome the owner and chairman of South Shields FC, Geoff Thompson. Thanks for speaking with me today.
My pleasure, Michael. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Obviously, you know, it's 5 years. Well, it's the weekend of the 5 years since you bought the club. So we're here to reflect on that, on the good moments there and the pivotal moments since that time. But it would be remiss of me to not sort of mention and talk about the Null and Void situation. Is there any updates regarding that so far?
Well, as many people will know, ourselves and many other clubs started some engagement with the Football Association and with the league to try and lobby for a different decision. So, you know, we've been engaged with that process now for some time. So we are, to summarise, we are challenging the decision. Unfortunately, there's not a lot I can say because there's strict confidentiality clauses about the process that we have to follow. But just to reassure everybody, not just South Shields fans, but a whole host of other clubs and many other non-league fans, that, you know, we do think there's been a bit of an injustice, and we're trying to take that argument forward. And as soon as I can, I'll brief everybody on the outcome. But we're certainly not letting it rest.
Yeah, definitely. That's yeah, as I say, I think it needs to be all the way down the pyramid base. It can't be one rule for some, one rule for others. And South Shields in such a strong position. It's, you know.
Yeah. I mean, there's other clubs like, you know, if you mention other clubs like Vauxhall Motors or Jersey Bulls, they were already mathematically promoted.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not just South Shields. And I could go on. There's a long list of clubs that feel the same way as us. So, as I say, we're doing our best to challenge the decision, but I've got to be aware of the process we've got to follow and the confidentiality that applies to it. But just to, as I say, repeating myself, just to reassure fans of non-league generally, but certainly our own fans, that, you know, we're doing our best to try and get the decision revisited.
Yeah, definitely. That's good. Right, well, hopefully, of course, it goes in favour of ourselves and everybody else affected by that, especially the teams, as you say, that secured promotion automatically. It's not a fair way to go, and hopefully they revisit it and see, you know, that there's a different alternative out there, which points per game will continue in the season, whichever will go down.
Yeah, let's hope so, Michael.
Yeah, hope so. Right. Well, as I say, it's on to happier times anyway, because yesterday, Friday, was the 5-year anniversary of your buying South Shields Football Club. Congratulations on that, and what a ride it's been so far. Just what made you sort of buy South Shields Football Club 5 years ago yesterday?
Well, you know, some people will have heard me comment on this before, but I got a letter from one of the lads, from Bob Ray actually, thinking that the club just were looking for a sponsor. And I replied to the letter, hadn't realised the predicament the club were in. So I met with Bob and Gary and a few other of the committee lads who frankly had kept the club going over that period. I wasn't aware at the time that we were playing down in Peterlee, that we'd, you know, our lease at what is now Mariners Park had come to an end. So effectively we'd been kind of kicked out of our ground, playing 30 odd miles away. And I hadn't appreciated all of those circumstances. And, you know, having met the lads and, you know, being a South Shields lad myself, it just felt like it was the right thing to do. That said, you know, my initial plan was just to try and help find another ground, you know, and I spent many months talking to Gary Crookwell and all the lads involved at the club, and indeed talking to the council and other parties to try and find another location. But all of those didn't really transpire, you know, didn't come off. And so the only option was to buy what is now Mariners Park and bring the club home. So that's what I did.
Yeah, brilliant. And so you bought the club, you bought Mariners Park, brought them back home. What were your initial expectations of how things would go at that time?
Well, you know, I'd love to say we had this grand plan, and everything that's happened in the last 5 years was part of that plan. But as we all know in life, you know, that's not the way it works. I mean, the truth is that I wanted to get the club home, and that was the main priority. Probably what I didn't appreciate was that, you know, having bought the freehold and brought the club back, the place hadn't had a lick of paint for, you know, 30 odd years, I would argue. No disrespect to the previous owner, but, you know, the place was pretty run down.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to spend quite a bit of money just getting the clubhouse and the facilities back up to a sensible standard. And as you know, South Shields fans will know, we've carried on with that investment over that 5-year period. But to come back to your question, though, you know, that initial plan was just get home, get the season kicked off back in Northern League Division 2, and beyond that, there wasn't really much of a plan. I think I do remember worrying in the first home game how many programs to print, how many pies to order, how many beers to buy.
Yeah.
We ran out of beer on that first home game, I recall, and I even had my wife and my stepdaughter running up to Tesco to buy more cans of beer. So it's quite funny thinking about it, because, you know, I should know the crowd, and shame on me for not, but it was certainly into the hundreds of people turned up at that first home game.
Mm-hmm.
And we, of course, had no way of knowing. I think our average gate down at Peterlee was around 70, our average home gate down there. And, of course, we blew that number out the water in our first year back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was, I'm giving you a long-winded answer, as I always do. But, you know, it was just, you know, there wasn't really a plan other than get the club established and get it home, and then to sort of work out where we needed to invest and where we might go next.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. And 5 years, I mean, how quick has it actually felt to you?
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying, actually. I think, you know, to think that it's 3 years ago we were at Wembley, you know, winning the Vars, and that unbelievable season of 16-17 where we had a record points total to win the league, and we won 4 cups. You know, it was an incredible season. And to think that was 3 years ago, and of course we've carried on with progress since then. Yep. Obviously, disappointing result last season when we narrowly got pipped in the playoffs, and then of course, as we've just spoken about, the potential expunging and nulling and voiding of this season. Yep. So we've had a couple of years of disappointment, notwithstanding what I said earlier, that we're going to try and get that decision revisited. But yeah, I mean, notwithstanding the disappointment of narrowly missing out the year before, i.e. that last season gone, I think we've had a great run. And more importantly, you know, it's what the club has done with the support of the fans and the sponsors. You know, we've come a long way in terms of first team results, but we're doing an awful lot more in the community. You know, we've set up our own charitable foundation. Yeah. We've got our Futures Academy now, working with Mortimer College, and obviously our main academy as well, you know, with some very talented young footballers there as well. So there's an awful lot of things that have been happening, not just first team results. The club's gone on, you know, come on leaps and bounds really over that 5-year period. And it's incredible that, as you say, Michael, you know, 5 years have passed in the blink of an eye, really.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. I think one of the pivotal moments in the 5 years since you took charge was the signing of Julio Arca. You know, I mean, he's going to be remembered for generations and generations, I'm sure. Could you talk us through how that signing actually came about? How was it even became aware that Arca could potentially be available and, you know, come to South Shields?
Well, it's all credit to John King, who was our manager at the time. You know, John had been in touch with Julio, and it was John who brokered the idea and brokered the sort of, well, the concept that Julio might come and step down a little bit. He had been playing a little bit of football for, I think it was Willow Pond in Sunderland. Mm-hmm. So we suspected he might still have an appetite to play football at a lower level. Yeah. And all credit to John, as I say, he got the deal done with me. But, you know, it was John's initiative, in fairness, nothing to do with me. I just made sure that once we had Julio's sort of attention, that we struck a good deal for him and a good deal for the club. And as you know, he was an absolutely unbelievable sort of talisman, a great leader, a real example to younger players. He lost none of his enthusiasm for football, and certainly when you listen to Julio talk about his time at South Shields, you know, it ranks as highly as his time at Sunderland and Middlesbrough. So he was an incredible ambassador for us, and we were very lucky to have him.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, he's absolutely fantastic. So, you know, on the field then, what would be the sort of the main favourite memories? I mean, obviously the Vars were standard, of course, but what other moments do stand out for you?
Yeah, well, I've commented on the sort of first few games back where we were struggling to work out how many pies and beers and programs to order. So I have some sort of fun, quirky memories of those early days. I also have some memories of, you know, when our pitch wasn't in the right condition, and the season before we won the Vars, we played Morpeth, and I'm sure again fans will remember, but our pitch hadn't survived that winter, if you like. It was like a mud bath. I have a memory of the Morpeth chairman plodging around in his boots with the ref and a few other officials, because our pitch was, as I say, was a bit of a bog. And if you recall, we had to play the game up at Concert in the end, and we went out on penalties. I think the final score was 10-11 to Morpeth. Yeah. So my point is, I have memories that aren't always necessarily really positive ones, but they're still stuck in the memory. You know, going up to Concert midweek, freezing cold night, and then sadly getting put out on penalties by Morpeth was a difficult one. And then, of course, the following season we win the Vars, and yes, we met Morpeth again, and we all know about our floodlight failure, which sadly will always be remembered for the wrong reasons. But you know, we referred that to the FA, as you know, and it was the FA's decision whether or not the game should be replayed or whether the tie should have been awarded to Morpeth. I do have some sympathy for Morpeth in that, you know, they probably would have gone on and won that tie had the floodlights not failed. But anyway, we did have the replay. As you know, we didn't get the game. We couldn't get our floodlights fixed in time. Yeah. And so we had to play them at their ground, and we beat them convincingly at their ground. So lots of memories, really. As I say, a couple of them there which weren't necessarily positive outcomes, but and then beyond that, I think obviously when we won each of the division titles, they're special moments. But yeah, it's been a really enjoyable period. I think what I'd also say, and you've heard me say it before, Michael, as have the fans, you know, I see myself as the caretaker of the club, if you like. And as you know, we've come a long way, but we've got an awful long way still to go. We've got some exciting plans for the club moving forward, including the fans becoming shareholders of the club. Yeah. So, you know, whilst it's been an exciting 5 years, there's an awful lot more still to do. But I'm very pleased with the progress we've made. I think we've got a terrific group of people involved in the club, from Keith, Lee, Graham, you know, John, Wes, Jamie, you know, the list goes on, and I shouldn't, of course, exclude any of the committee lads who were the ones who kept the club going, not least of whom, of course, is Gary. Yeah. So, yeah, we've got a great team of people. The club's well placed. We've made some great progress. I've got some fond memories. We've had some great times, and let's hope they continue. I'm sure they will.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully so. And Project AFL still, you know, alive and kicking, despite the setback of the coronavirus and the Null and Void situation. Yeah.
It's been, you know, nobody could have predicted, of course, the pandemic, and you know, again, people's health and well-being is of paramount importance. You know, I must emphasise that. But at some point, it'll be safe to watch football again. So we look forward to the day we can welcome our fans back to Mariners. It's that sort of pandemic, and of course the FA decision to null and expunge the results has been a bit of a punch in the solar plexus, if you like. But we're strong enough to get over it, whatever the outcome. You know, as I've said, we were planning to launch our share option scheme.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for a planning decision on the redevelopment of the ground, which includes, the new, roughly 1,000-seater stand and a new academy building. So all of those plans, disappointingly have been delayed a little, and certainly with the pandemic for all the right reasons. It has delayed matters, but the strategy and the plan and the execution of it haven't changed. It's just a question of timing, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just on the sort of the infrastructure, I guess would say with all of these plans there, it was quite interesting. Yesterday, I was seeing a few of the old photos kicking about, and when you said it hadn't had a lick of paint, I seen there was one picture of you stood outside of the clubhouse, and yeah, so I think definitely you've definitely improved the infrastructure.
Yeah, it's really odd. Actually, I look back at some of those photographs and it's quite staggering, isn't it? We've got, if anyone has a time to look at those images, there was no boards around the ground particularly because we didn't have, we hadn't been at home for a couple of years.
Yeah.
As I said before, the pitch was not in the best order, certainly in winter. The clubhouse was dropping to bits. There was an awful lot to do. And of course, we didn't have our 3G training facility. We didn't have any stands or cover other than our main stand, of course. So yeah, there's been a lot. I mean, if you think through the kind of chronology of what's been done, we've obviously upgraded the clubhouse, as I've said.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of money on the pitch, basically lifting the pitch, putting all the drainage in, putting the irrigation system in. The stands, all right, they might be modest, but we've given the fans some shelter, and we obviously plan to further improve that. The 3G was a big commitment financially. So yeah, there's been so many elements. The new floodlights last season, so the investments continued, but all with the intention of getting us to a point where, we progress on the pitch, the fans keep turning up, and obviously without the fans and the sponsors, the whole thing just doesn't work, but it's fantastic to see the sort of crowds we had last year, averaging around 1,600, some games at home of over 3,000. So there's no doubt that South Shields Football Club has the potential to get itself back into the Football League. It's got the kind of the underlying support of the community, I think, and it's down to me to try and facilitate that, try and get the club to a point where many thousands of fans can come and enjoy a game of football, watch a good quality game of football at the right league, hopefully above where we are now, certainly, and to do so in some comfort and have a good family day out. That's the plan. And again, I repeat, but whilst also the club does an awful lot in the community, we're trying to deliver a whole series of health and well-being programs through the foundation.
Yeah.
And we're working, as you know, with the miners' welfare. So we've got I'm involved now as a trustee at the welfare, and the football club is a customer of the welfare, and the foundation run the site alongside the trustees of the welfare as well. So, so many elements of progress over the last 5 years, including, the important relationship with the welfare as well. I'd like to think we've helped secure the future of the miners' welfare and that facility for the community, whilst also obviously helping the football club and helping the foundation. So yeah, it's been an interesting time, but an awful lot more still to do, Michael.
Yeah, definitely. Just on the stand as well, do you think the stand alone would increase attendances even further, or do you think it needs to be going up the leagues, or potentially a mixture of both?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I think, if you put aside the impact of the coronavirus, which obviously is difficult to do because we don't know when the season's going to restart, and we don't know what social isolation rules will apply. But if we assume that eventually those things, dissipate and we get back to normal, we'll have nigh on 1,000 seats under cover with a good elevation and a good view of the pitch. That's in addition to the seats we've got in our current stand, our current main stand. Yeah. But yeah, getting promoted was key as well. That people want to see the highest possible level of football at South Shields, and that's what we're intent on delivering. In our financial modelling, we'd assumed we'd get average gates next year in National League North of 2,200. So there was some financial modelling jumping from 1,600 up to 2,200. The capacity of the ground hasn't changed over that period. It's just that we're getting a better environment, more people seated with a better view of the game and better facilities. But yeah, the idea was, if you think about it, in National League North, we would be playing, well, Blythe, on the assumption they weren't relegated. Clearly they won't be in the Null and Void scenario. But, Blythe, York, Spennymoor, Gateshead, of course, Darlington. So that in itself, those sort of fairly local derbies, I think, would have generated much higher home crowds as well. Yeah. And I think it's also fair to say that a lot of National League North clubs bring bigger travelling fans as well. So, outside the clubs I've just mentioned, they tend to have a higher away following.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, completely agree with that. So as well as your anniversary of buying the club, it's also the anniversary of the Warren Byrne dream goal as well of 4 years ago. Can you talk us through how much of an impact that had on the club?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, Warren, what a star. He did a great job for us at the time, and I have to confess I wasn't at the game seeing that goal live, so shame on me for not being there. Right. But as we all know, it got a lot of media interest very rapidly, both on social media and then latterly on mainstream media. So getting all of the sort of household name football pundits commenting on Warren's goal was pretty special. And we actually won, and obviously we looked after Warren as well, but we won on behalf of the club. Warren's goal secured a £50,000 sort of contribution from Budweiser, which we obviously used to invest in the club's facilities. Mm-hmm. But, all credit to Warren. That was an incredible goal, and there's been a few along the way. That one obviously stands out because of the publicity it got, but there's so many others as well. Julio's goal away from home in the Vars run, virtually the halfway line. Mm-hmm. And again, it's difficult to comment on individual goals because there's been so many. We've been very lucky and blessed to have some really talented footballers over the years, and they're certainly not they're not shy at putting the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, definitely not. So just looking ahead, obviously 5 years down, the next 5 years, what do you actually envisage there? Like, where do you think we'll be as far as the pyramid goes, and infrastructure-wise, fans-wise, stadium-wise, just the next 5 years, basically?
Well, what I hope is that we secure the planning approval, which obviously is outside of my control. It's with the South Tyneside Council currently. But if we were able to secure that planning approval, I think it's going to be summer of 21 now before the stand's built, if I'm honest, because of the pandemic and the delays. But nevertheless, we'll get that stand built. We'll start work on the academy building, again, all subject to getting planning, of course. The infrastructure will progressively just improve over the 5-year period. So, we'll carry on investing in those areas. It's got to be demand-led. So, as I keep saying, fans have to keep turning up, and sponsors and the community getting behind the club as they have done. But, our intention would be to be into National League as soon as possible, and then to be knocking on the door of the EFL. It's very difficult to predict, I mean, had we been chatting, Michael, 5 years ago when we were, coming back to South Shields, and we'd had average gates of 70 people, and we were sort of languishing in the sort of lower tier of the Northern League Division 2. Yeah. I mean, at that time, people wouldn't have predicted the progress we've made so far. So, we have to have a dream, and we have to have a plan and a way of implementing. And I think we've got all of that, our ambition, our dreams, but also some pragmatism as well about how can you deliver that, what steps are required in order to deliver it. It's not just some sort of pipe dream that hasn't got any foundation. I think it's important that whatever we do, we plan and execute correctly. But there's no reason why, a town the size of South Shields and South Tyneside, as a conurbation, no reason why we can't support a club that's back in the Football League. And that's certainly my intention, to try and facilitate that. And all I would say is, again, I can't do it on my own. It's down to the fans and the community and to the sponsors if people get behind the vision, then there's no reason why we can't achieve it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll be there every step of the way, I'm sure. You know, we'd love to have Football League, EFL football in the town, definitely. On sort of like, fan support, and I know you mentioned the share issue as well briefly earlier on. Financial projections, of course, you have to have them, but everything's up in the air with everything that's gone on. But in a normal sort of time, when would you sort of expect the club to finally become self-sufficient?
Yeah, well, again, I mentioned the financial model, and Keith, our MD, he sort of doesn't always throw himself forward, but he's a very, very important part of the team, and he's done an awful lot of work on the financial modelling for the club. And we've got a very detailed set of assumptions that we can sort of play tunes on, so we know the sensitivities of the model. Yeah. But fundamentally, to get to a position where the club's sustainable and independent of me, it requires clearly higher gates. So, I mentioned a modelling of around 2,200 average home gate in National League North. Once we get to that level and just a little bit beyond, then we're in touching distance of being sustainable. And I think, again, what comes with that is, right, gate receipts, food and beverage sales, sponsorship revenues, more away fans coming to Mariners. All of those things are in the mix, and all of them mean that we're likely to get to that break-even position quite quickly. And as far as the fans' contributions are concerned, obviously, the fans turning up and enjoying their day out at Mariners is key. But I also think, the club has to be owned by the community. And there's a number of examples of where that works well in the UK and in Scotland and indeed in Europe. So there's no reason why we can't follow the best examples of that. So my intention is, as a first step, to basically, we're looking to offer shares of, we're offering around 50,000 shares was the plan at £20 a share.
Yeah.
Now, the detailed work has all been done largely by Keith again. But, a lot of the work's been done. We've got a prospectus, we've got a promotional video, we've got all of the groundwork done. And had it not been for the pandemic and the coronavirus outbreak, we would have already launched it.
Yeah.
But obviously, we couldn't do so in the current climate. So my point is that a lot of this work's been done, and as soon as it's the right time to execute it, we'll be busy. We'll be back on our front foot, making that happen. And all of that, just gets the club to a point where it's more sustainable, and we can continue to progress.
Brilliant. Well, I look forward to the share issue coming out whenever that's going to be, of course. Finally, what is the one thing that you've done since taking over South Shields FC that really stands out for you, like your proudest moment, shall we say?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, Michael. I suppose, South Shields FC and South Shields as a town, we'd never been to Wembley before. Mm-hmm. So I have to say it's hard to beat that experience of, getting down to Wembley and having circa, we keep quoting different numbers, but 15 to 20,000 South Shields fans down at Wembley. That was a truly amazing weekend. So that one's quite hard to beat. But not just because of what we did on the pitch. I just think it's that sort of halo effect of success on the pitch, what it meant for the town and for South Tyneside. It was a wonderful moment. But I'm sure there'll be many others to come. So it is quite hard to pick out one, but I think that would probably be one of the standout moments for me, without doubt.
Yeah, brilliant. Were you part of the takeover of Covent Garden as well that weekend?
You know what? Sadly, I didn't go down there. My son did, my youngest son, and some of my family members were all down there, and I really missed out because I heard it was absolutely unbelievable down there on the Friday night, particularly. So, unfortunately, no, I was in the team hotel, still having a few beers, of course, but I didn't venture into Covent Garden, sadly.
Brilliant. Yeah, I missed out on it as well. Yeah, I travelled down like midnight the Sunday, so I was at Wembley for 9 a.m. But yeah, I missed out on that as well, unfortunately. So you and me.
We'll get there again, Michael. Don't worry, we'll have our time again. Maybe maybe the trophy next time around.
Brilliant. Hope so. I'd love to repeat that experience again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else you want to say? Any sort of messages to the fans or anything like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, making sure people stay safe and stick to these rules, which are, I know, increasingly difficult. I'm sure, like many others, I'm certainly struggling with it. But we have to stick and abide by the rules. So my main message is to stay safe and look after yourselves. Secondly, to thank them again for their support. We've had incredibly over 500 season tickets purchased before the season's even been defined for next year. And my thanks to the sponsors as well, who've stood up and support the club, even now at this uncertain time. So yeah, it's just a message of staying safe, looking after yourselves, thanking you for your support, and really look forward to seeing everybody back at Mariners when it's safe to do so. So I really look forward to that day and having a few beers and watching football again. I can't wait for it.